Hello grade 9s, welcome to our tutorials again. This video is mainly going to concentrate on speaking about the gradient, which I have discussed already in Finding the Rule, but it's good to go over it again. We're also going to discuss the midpoint, and we're also going to discuss the distance equation. So let's start off with the gradient first. Okay, so the gradient is the slope of our line. Okay, so if you hear gradient, it also means slope. Okay, I have drawn this graph quite big, so you can see that we're looking at 2 points. So that's what happens with a gradient. You're looking at two certain points on a graph. You can pick any 2 points and you can find the gradient. Okay, so you pick any 2 points and we're going to find the change in y over the change in x to get that slope. Okay, I'll talk about that further. What we should do first when we've picked 2 points on a graph is you should show their ordered pairs to make it easier on yourself. Okay, so what is this point here? Well, we know that x equals 1 here, so our x must go first in our ordered pairs, whereas this point on the y, it's at 2. So we've got the ordered pair 1, 2. What about this one here? X, well, if we had our imaginary line, which you can use your ruler for, go down there, x equals 2 at this point, because we're looking at our x value first. What does our y value equal here? Well, let's go across. It equals 4. So we have the point here, 2, 4. We can actually label these ordered pairs too. So this is my first point here, 1, 2. So I'm going to label my x value as x1 and my x point, my y point here, which is 2, as y1. Because it's my first point, I have x1 and y1. So point 2, my second point, which is 2, 4, 2 is going to be labelled as x2, and my y value is going to be y2, because it's my second point. What is our rule for gradient? Well, it's m equals rise over run. Okay, rise over run. So what's the rise over run? Well, the rise is the change in our y value, and our run is the change in our x value. And it actually, when you've worked it out, looks like a triangle. Okay, so what does that rise mean? Well, when I mean the change in y, we're looking at the change between our two y values on these points. So we can actually write our new rule as m for the rise. Instead of rise, we can write it as y2. So the y point in our second ordered pair, take the y value from our first ordered pair, the change between those 2 points for y. Run, so rise over run, run actually means the change in x. So we can say x2, the x point in our second ordered pair, take x1, which is the coordinate x in our first ordered pair. Okay, so we can actually write the equation as m equals y2 take y1 over x2 take x1. Once we have that, we can use the values from these 2 points into our equation. So m equals, what does my y2 equal? It equals 4. What does my y1 equal 2. So it's 4 take 2. What does my x2 equal? It equals 2. And what does my x1 equal? 1. So it's 2 take 1. Okay, and that's m. Because we're finding the gradient, m equals gradient. So what's 4 take 2? It's 2. So you would need to do all that working out, but I'm just going to rub it out because I have limited space. So that equals 2. What does 2 take 1 equal? 1. What's 2 divided by 1? Equals 2. So our m value equals 2. So we've actually found our gradient, okay? And that's all you have to do for gradient. If you were given a linear equation, okay, the midpoint you need to think of as the middle point between those 2 points we've picked, okay? So the middle, think of the middle, okay? So we've already labelled our points as x1, y1 and x2, y2. What's the rule for midpoint? Well, midpoint equals, what does it equal? x2 plus x1. Our x value goes first, okay? When we're finding the ordered pair, our x values go first. So x2 plus x1, so that's the x coordinate at point 2 plus the x coordinate at point 1 that we've selected, over 2. Okay, so it's like just finding the average. We're adding these two together, dividing by 2 to actually get that midpoint. So that's for the x. What about when we want to get the y? Well, we do y2, so the y coordinate at point 2 plus the y coordinate at point 1 over 2. Okay, so if we were going to do it on this graph, the one we've already been doing an example on, okay, so what's my x2? It's 2. What's my x1? 1. So 2 plus 1 equals 3. And it'll be divided by 2. So it's 3 over 2. I would leave it as a fraction because it's going to look a lot cleaner than a decimal. If you did a decimal, it doesn't matter. I would still count it. Okay? So we do the same for our y now. So y2, which is 4, plus y1. So 4 plus 2 is 6, which is then over 2. So we have, so our midpoint equals then 3 over 2, 6 over 2. We can make our y value smaller because 6 divided by 2 is 3. So our final point for the midpoint would be 3 over 2 as our x and 3 for our y. And that's how we find the midpoint. The last equation that you'll need to know for linear graphs, and you'll be asked to do in the exam, is the distance equation. So the distance equation can be found by using Pythagoras, which is c squared equals a squared plus b squared. So we can actually use Pythagoras because you can see that the distance between these 2 points shows a triangle. We can actually use Pythagoras to find the value of this line if we know the other 2. So our longest line, or our hypotenuse, is known as C. Okay. Then we can label either side as A or B. Okay. So you can actually label this one A, label this one B. So So what's our c squared? That's what we're actually going to find out. So we're going to leave c squared. What's my a? Well, remember to work out this line. We're seeing the difference between the two values, which is y2 take y1. So 4 take 2 is 2. So my a equals 2 squared. Remember, a is being squared. What does my b equal? Well, that's my bottom line here. So we're looking at the change in x this time. So that's my x2 take x1, which is 2 take 1, which is 1 squared. Okay, so once I've got that value, which is c squared equals, I'm just going to write it up here, c squared equals 2 squared plus 1 squared, we can actually calculate these through. So 2 squared is 4, 1 squared is 1, so 4 plus 1 is 5, so we know that c squared equals 5 now. So c squared equals 5. How can we find c by itself? Well, when it's being squared, we do the inverse, which is the square root of 5. You can leave it as the square root of 5. That's its simplest form and probably its most easiest to be read. So you can actually use Pythagoras as the distance formula. And it's probably easiest to remember by using Pythagoras that way. Okay, so in this video we looked at the gradient, we also looked at the midpoint, and we also looked at the distance. Okay, thank you for watching.